whom everyone liked and no one thought about. All this he was on one side of the report, but on the other there were certain stories that were something more than the ordinary. Wilbraham was obviously a sentimentalist and an enthusiast. There was the extraordinary case, shortly after I first met him, of his championship of X, a man who had been caught card-sharping and received a year's imprisonment for it. On X leaving prison, Wilbraham championed and defended him, put him up for months in his rooms in Duke Street, walked as often as possible in his company down Piccadilly, and took him over to Paris. It says a great deal for Wilbraham's accepted normality and his general popularity that this championship of X did him no harm. Some men, it is true, did murmur something about birds of a feather, and one or two kind friends warned Wilbraham in the way kind friends have, and to them he simply said, "If a fella's a pal, he's a pal." There followed a year or two later the much more celebrated business of Lady C. I need not go into all that now, but here again Wilbraham constituted himself her defender, although she robbed, cheated and maligned him, as she robbed, cheated and maligned everyone who was good to her. It was quite obvious that he was not in love with her, and the obviousness of it was one of the things in him that annoyed her. He simply felt, apparently, that she had been badly treated, the very last thing she had been. Gave her any money he had, put his rooms at the disposal of herself and her friends, and, as I have said, championed her everywhere. This affair did very nearly finish him socially and in his regiment. It was not so much they minded his caring for Lady C. After all, any man can be fooled by any woman. But it was Lady C's friends who made the whole thing so impossible. Well, that affair luckily came to an end just in time. Lady C disappeared to Berlin and was no more seen. There were other cases, into which I need not go, when Wilbraham was seen in strange company, always championing somebody who was not worth the championing. He had no social tact, and for them, at any rate, no moral sense. In himself he was the most ordinary, normal man about town. No prude, but straight as a man can be in his debts, his love affairs, his friendships and his sport. Then came the war. He did brilliantly at Mons, was wounded twice, went out to Gallipoli, had a touch of Palestine, and returned to France again to share in Foch's final triumph. No man can possibly have had more of the war than he had, and it is my own belief that he had had just a little too much of it. He had been always perhaps a little queer, as we are most of us queer somewhere, and the horrors of that horrible war undoubtedly affected him. Finally, he lost, just a week before armistice, one of his best friends, Ross MacLean, a loss from which he certainly never recovered. I have now, I think, brought together all the incidents that can throw any kind of light upon the final scene. In the middle of 1919, he retired from the army, and it was from this time to his death that I saw something of him. He went back to his old rooms at Horton's in Duke Street, and as I was living at that time in Marlborough Chambers in Jermyn Street, we were within easy reach of one another. The early part of 1920 was a queer time. People had become, I imagine, pretty well accustomed to realizing that the 2 wonderful hours of Armistice Day had not ushered in the millennium any more than those first marvellous moments of the Russian Revolution produced it. Everyone had always hoped for the millennium, but the trouble since the days of Adam and Eve has always been that people have such different ideas as to what exactly that millennium shall be. The plain facts of the matter simply were that during 1919 and 1920, the world changed from a war of nations to a war of classes. That inevitable change that history has always shown follows on great wars. As no one ever reads history, it was natural enough that there should be a great deal of disappointment and a great